Why wait to see if you'll get something you like this Valentine's Day when you can go to BlueNile.com and find something you'll love? Whether you're looking to treat yourself to a little winter sparkle or show a galentine how much you appreciate them, Blue Nile offers a wide selection of high-quality designs, expert guidance, and free 30-day returns for the ultimate peace of mind. You can even design your own jewelry. Right now, save up to 50% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
When it comes to teaching kids and teens about money, practice makes perfect. That's where Greenlight comes in. With a debit card and money app of their own, kids learn to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest. Parents send instant money transfers, create custom chores, and automate allowance, while kids track their spending, set savings goals, and practice money skills they can use today and for life. Get 1 month free when you sign up at greenlight.com/podcast.
Welcome to Haunting History, the podcast that reaches back into the past for the events that shocked everyone. Tales of true crime, mystery, and the macabre. And when we're lucky, the stories where history and the people who lived it and the paranormal meet. Now, who doesn't live a good ghost story, right? Welcome back to Haunting History Podcast. This is Kat. And I am lucky enough to have both my co-hosts with me today, Haley.
Hi.
And Tress.
Hello.
And we are at episode 4 of our second season. We just finished the 3-part series on the Black Dahlia and Elizabeth Short, and we're hoping that you have that you enjoyed it, that you listened to it. If you did or didn't, or you have any comments, please message us. Again, our website is hauntinghistorypodcast.com, and you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Forgot what other platform. And Facebook at Haunting History Podcast. You just do a search, and we hope that you're getting used to our new logo. And if you've listened to all 3 parts of the series, you've seen the logo and hopefully commented and told us what you thought of it. If you like the old one better, if you like the new one better, what your thoughts are. And today we are going, and we have a new Patreon page that we have 5 different levels of tiers. And one of them, or 2 of them, I think, 2 or 3 of them include our bloopers. So if you're interested in that, visit our Patreon page. We're going to have exclusive content for just our members only. So please check that out. It's Haunting History at, if you go to Patreon, patreon.com and search Haunting History Podcast, make sure you have podcast in there. Today we're going to be talking about, and I need to ask Tress and Haley. I know Tress has heard of it because she's been doing a little bit of the paranormal research on this story, but I don't know if you've heard it. Did you? First of all, Tress, it's the Villisca It's the Villisca Ax Murders. Now you are looking at the paranormal site, like the paranormal information about it and what people have said about it, but do you know the story too?
No, I do not.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
So you just read the paranormal stuff?
Yes.
But you had to hear a little bit about the family.
Reading that, it gives you a little bit of history of the family, but
Hey,
I didn't know about it until we started researching it.
Have you heard of it, Haley?
No, I haven't heard of it at all.
You never heard of it?
Mm-mm.
It's actually a really sad story. It's a lot like this. It's not really like the Sauter family. The Sauter family, I still believe, if you've listened to our episode on the Sauter family, I still feel like that story can somewhat be resolved. I mean, we'll probably never find who did it, but the part of that story could still be resolved with DNA. And I hope that someone someday does the DNA on that so they can figure out some part of that story. Unfortunately, with this story, the Villisca Ax Murders, DNA wouldn't help us. And it's one of the... I want to say it's probably the most famous unsolved crime of Iowa. We're in Iowa this time. In a town called Villisca. And I'll just go ahead into the story, and then you guys just ask questions as we go along. Sometime after midnight on June 10th, 1912, approximately 106 years ago, and I didn't want to say 106 years ago because we always get our math wrong.
It's 1912.
1912. What did I say?
106 years ago.
Sorry, did I say 1912 though? Mm-hmm. Sorry, but for some reason we have problems with numbers.
I know.
So this happened on June 10th, 1912. So it was about 106 years ago, right?
107.
Why?
Oh, well, it will be 107 in
this
June.
year? Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I'm always a year off. I maybe because I'm always making myself younger. So I do that with like everything. Sometime after midnight on June 10th, 1912, an unknown person or persons entered the home of the Moore family. The home located at 508 East 2nd Street in Villisca, Iowa, and violently ended the lives of 8 people. Josiah Moore, who was 43, his wife Sarah Montgomery Moore, 39, their children Herman, 11, Catherine, 10, Boyd, 7, Paul, 5, and sadly 2 neighbor children, who were Lena Stillinger, 12, and her sister Ina, who was only 8. The murder soon became known as the Villisca Ax Murders and started what would become the most notorious murders in Iowa history and remains unsolved to this day. On the night before the murders, which was Sunday, June 9th, the family attended what was called the Children's Day service at the Presbyterian Church. Accompanying them were Ina and Lena Stillinger. Apparently, Sarah had called the Stillinger parents and asked if the girls could go with them to this event at the church and to spend the night with the family and then just go home in the morning because she knew it was going to be late. And so they, the parents said, yeah, that's fine. They could go. And they went to this event. And Sarah was the co-director and her children performed at the little program that they did. And they did speeches and recitations. And the service ended with a mingling, a social thing that lasted until at least 9:30 p.m. The family walked the 3 blocks home and ended the night with cookies and milk before retiring to their beds. According to a reconstruction attempted by the town coroner the next day, the murderer entered the house, and they do know the door was unlocked. It was a small town. It was 1912. They didn't lock their doors. Mm-hmm. The murderer entered the house, took an oil lamp from a dresser, removed the chimney, and placed it out of the way under a chair. He bent the wick into to minimize the flame and lit the lamp. It was turned down so low that it cast only the faintest glimmer in the sleeping house. Still carrying the axe, which they found out later he got from the coal house. It was leaning against a coal shed on the backyard. So
it was their axe.
It was their axe. The stranger walked past one bedroom. Now, I mean, I guess a reconstruction would do this. The stranger walked past one bedroom in which the 2 Stillinger girls were sleeping, slipped up the narrow staircase that led to the 2 other bedrooms. Seemingly to know the layout of the home, he walked past the room in which 4 of the young children, the 4 more children, were sleeping, and crept into the room in which Joe Moore lay next to his wife, Sarah. Raising the axe high above his head, and they know this because he raised it so high that it gorged the ceiling, the man brought the flat of the blade down on the back of Joe Moore's head, crushing his skull and probably killing him instantly. Then he struck Sarah a blow before she had time to wake or register his presence. Leaving the couple dead or dying, the killer then went next door and used the axe to kill the 4 more children as they slept. Once again, there's no evidence that Herman, Catherine, Boyd, or Paul woke before they died. The assailant or any of the 4 children, didn't make any sufficient noise to disturb the 2 girls sleeping downstairs because there was no indication that they woke up and ran from the house. Killer then took the stairs down, took the axe to the Stillinger girls, and this is a sad thing. The elder, they believe, woke an instant before she was murdered because she had a defense wound on her arm. So he killed the parents first, then the 4 more children. Then he went downstairs, killed the youngest Stillinger daughter, and then killed the oldest one. What did I say her name was? Lena. Last.
And she's the one that had the defensive.
She's the one who had the defense. Yeah, the defense wound. Okay, and then this is what is actually more chilling than the fact that he just killed everybody, but he went back upstairs and then hit them all again. Reduced, they say, this is the words that I read. Reduced the heads of all 6 Moors to a bloody pulp, striking Joe alone an estimated 30 times, leaving the faces of all 6 members of the family unrecognizable. So, killed them, went downstairs, killed the 2 girls, and then went back and did it again.
I don't even have words.
No, and then he did something even weirder. He drew the bedclothes up to cover Joe and Shara's head, and then he found an undershirt, is what he put over Herman's head. And then he found a dress that he put over Catherine's head. And then he found other articles of clothing to put over Boyd and Paul. And then he did the same thing. After he did this, he went back downstairs, rebeat the Stillinger girls, leaving them unrecognizable also. The one thing is that was weird that it didn't happen with any of the other girls in the house, which was the only one And there's only one more daughter. They were all boys. Catherine was the only girl. Lena, again, the one that had woken up, her nightgown was lifted up past her waist and her underwear were removed. And then she had this is poor Lena, she had the mark on her arm that she had fought back, at least attempted to raise her arm to protect herself. And she had blood, and then she had blood on her thigh. So, I don't know how much she fought back. Someone says that another thing that I read, and I don't know how they would know it, said that she ran and hid in a closet and he dragged her out. And that's why, like, her nightgown was moved and stuff. I don't know how anyone would know that.
No.
The blood splatters indicated that they were all
in bed.
Yeah. After he covered all of them with random pieces of clothing or bedclothes, he went around the house and did the same thing to any reflective surface. He covered the mirrors. He covered the windows. The windows, he used skirts and aprons he found in the house. So, like, any pictures that were sitting around that had, like, glass frames, he covered those. So anything that was reflective, he covered, including the windows. The windows, I think he covered so no one could see what was going on in the house. But that's very ritualistic, I think, to have gone around and covered everything. The doctors did conclude, though, that Lena had not been sexually abused that they know of, but they don't really know. It actually gets weirder. After he covered all the mirrors and any piece of glass with clothing or fabric or anything that he could find, he took a 2-pound slab of uncooked bacon from the icebox, wrapped it in a towel, and then left it on the floor. And then some reports that I read, and not all of them have this, only some of them, say that he performed some kind of sexual act on the bacon, on the 2-pound slab of bacon. Now, to me, if people are going to say that, it would be definitive. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they would have had to have found some kind of bodily fluids to say that in fact happened.
Yeah.
So I'm a little tripped out by that. But he did stay in the house for a long time. They found a plate of food on the kitchen table. They found a basin filled with water that he had evidently cleaned his hands in because it was bloody water. And he left a key ring or some sort of thing next to, like a keychain next to the piece of bacon. No one knows. So it's all very strange. I mean, it was so violent. What he did was so insanely violent. I believe that it probably, I don't know. It had to be sexual in nature somehow, right? That someone, I mean, it's either passion or
it sounds like it's
anger.
sexually natured, and it's someone that knew the family.
So it sounds
that
like
would have known those girls were there.
It's all very odd. Yeah. I mean, they say that some people say that he was watching the family in advance.
Were they like a known family for something, or they're just like a normal random family?
No, they were known. It was a small town of less than 5,000 people.
But were they like
he was
owners of anything?
Yeah, he was successful. He ran an farming equipment business. So, I mean, he definitely could afford. It was a really tiny house, too, and we'll have a picture of it on our website. But it wasn't a big house. It was a very small little house. But they weren't excessively wealthy, but they weren't poor either. They weren't struggling either. The Moore family was not discovered until several hours later when a neighbor, whose name was Mary Peckham, worried that she didn't see any sign of life. The household was normally like very loud. Like they have 4 kids and 2 kids spending the night. And the dad was up early to go to work. And it was a Monday morning. So the neighbor was out hanging her laundry and was like, where are they? Like, why are they not up around? Why aren't they running around? So she got concerned and called Josiah. By the way, people call him Joe. Joe's brother Ross, and told him, like, your brother's house is really quiet. That's not normal. Can you come take a look? So he got there and he tried to look in the windows, and that's when they saw that all the windows were covered, which actually concerned them even more because that wasn't a normal thing for them to have. Everything normally would be open. Aside from just the front door being unlocked, normally the whole entire house, the windows would be open, the curtains would be open. Like they were just in and out. It was a busy family. And so he got there, was already concerned, and then got there and got excessively concerned when he noticed all the window coverings were covered, all the windows were covered. So he went through his key ring. It took him forever, I guess. People were talking about how long it took him to figure out the key. So he finally found the key to get into the house. And he opened the front door, and he barely...
So the murderer locked the door when he left?
Locked the door and took the keys. I forgot to say that.
Yeah.
He locked the door and took the keys with him. when he entered the house, he only got as far as where the Stillinger girls were. He saw everything covered, all the lamps and all the lights covered. He saw the Stillinger girls first and ran back out of the house before even looking for his own brother or his family, and called this is what's so funny now because this was 1912. He called the hardware store, telling the employee, who was Ed Sully, to fetch Marshal Henry Hank Horton. And Hank arrived at the house about 8:30. So I think it was around 7 o'clock that Mary Peckham had, 7 or 7:30. She had called the brother, and then the marshal arrived at 8:30. He went through the house and found, as he told Ross when he came out, somebody murdered in every bed. The partially cleaned murder weapon was left leaning against the south wall of the downstairs bedroom, where the visiting Stillingers were found. Horton brought along Doctors J. Clark Cooper and Edgar Hu and Wesley Ewing, who was the minister of the Moores Presbyterian congregation. They were followed by the county coroner, who was a gentleman named L. Lindquist, and a third doctor, F.S. Williams. He was the one who was the first one to examine the bodies and estimate the time of deaths. When a shaken Dr. Williams emerged, he cautioned the members of the growing crowd outside. Now, this is what would never happen here either. I mean, current day would not happen. He mentioned to the growing crowd outside, "Don't go in there. You'll regret it until the last day of your life." Many ignored the advice, and as many as 100 curious neighbors and townspeople basically tramped through the house as they pleased.
Walked around that crime scene.
That was right out the window. Anything that they would have found or could have found was complete. And this is the most macabre thing. And I love macabre. Like, this is why I do this. Took a piece of Joe's skull to keep as a keepsake.
Who did?
One of the neighbors.
What?
Yeah, took a piece of the skull.
That's creepy.
I know.
Did they look into him?
I know, right? The crime scene was completely ruined as far as evidence was concerned. The next day, this happened on the morning of the 10th, I think. The 11th. Yeah, so the next day, they had to take their bodies to the fire department because the fire department was the only building big enough to hold
that many dead people.
They didn't have any place to take them. The funeral service was held in the town square. Thousands attended. National Guardsmen blocked the street as a hearse moved toward the firehouse where all the bodies were taken. The caskets that had not been on display for obvious reasons were carried on several wagons to the Villisca Cemetery for burial. Their funeral cortege was 50 carriages long. So, to the investigation, the police had few leads. It's a small town in Iowa, very low crime. Everybody knew each other. They did what is called now a half-hearted attempt to search the town and the surrounding countryside. And they even brought in bloodhounds, but it was not successful. The crime scene had been so fully demolished that even if they tried to get a scent to a dog, I mean...
There's 100 people that walked through that house.
Had already touched everything. And then
100
people had walked through the town to get there. So, the bloodhounds didn't even know what they were searching for. Every transient and otherwise unaccounted for stranger was the suspect in the murders. One suspect was a man named Andy Sawyer. There's not really any evidence to link him to the crime, but his name came off often in all the grand jury testimonies. And the gentleman his name was Thomas Dyer of Burlington, Iowa. He was a foreman and a pile driver for the Burlington Railroad. And this Andrew Sawyer had approached him at 6 a.m. in Creston, which is the next town over, on the morning that the murders were discovered. Sawyer was clean-shaven and wearing a brown suit when he arrived. His shoes were covered in mud and his pants were wet nearly to the knees. He asked for employment as Dyer needed, and because he needed extra man, he was given a job on the spot. Dyer testified later that evening when the crew reached Fontenelle, Iowa, Sawyer purchased a newspaper and went off by himself to read it. The newspaper carried a front-page account of the Villisca murders, and according to Dyer, the gentleman who had hired him, Sawyer was much interested in it. His crew complained that Sawyer slept with his clothes on and was anxious to be by himself. They were also very uneasy because Sawyer slept with an axe next to him. He often talked to about the Villisca murders and whether or not a killer had been apprehended. He reportedly told Dyer that he had been in Villisca that Sunday night and had heard of the murders. Afraid of being taken as a suspect, he left and gone to Dresden, he had left and gone to Creston. And because Dyer was suspicious, he turned him over to the sheriffs. Dyer later testified that prior to the sheriff's arrival, he walked up behind Sawyer, who was rubbing his head with both hands, suddenly jumped up and said to himself, "I will cut your goddamn heads off." At the same time, he made striking motions with the axe and began hitting the piles of wood in front of him. Dyer's son, J.R., testified that one day as the crew drove through Villisca, Sawyer told him he would show J.R. where the man who killed the Moore family got out of town. He said the man had jumped over a box, which he pointed out about 1.5 blocks away, and then showed where he crossed the railroad track. J.R. said that there were footprints in the soggy ground north of the embankment. Sawyer told J.R. to look at the other side of the car, and he said he would show him where the old tree where the murderer stepped into the creek. According to J.R., he looked over and saw such a tree of the track about 4 blocks away. Now, remember, when he arrived to get the job, his pants were wet up to his knees and he was covered in mud. Sawyer was dismissed as a subject in the case when officials learned that he could prove that he had been in another town in Iowa on the night of the murders. He had been arrested for vagrancy there, and the sheriff recalled putting him on a train to send him away at approximately 11 p.m. that evening. So he couldn't have been there, I guess. But he was the suspect that they, right off the bat, just kind of assumed it was him.
Because they assumed it was someone that wouldn't have known the family. Or
Assumed,
now I would assume it was someone that knew the family.
Well, then the next suspect is going to really interest you. Frank Jones, a neighbor and Iowa state senator who was an enemy of Josiah Moore. They were competitors in farm equipment sales. What had happened is that when Josiah had first moved to the town with his family, he worked for Frank Jones in his farm equipment selling business, and then ended up going off on his own and opening his own business and becoming a competitor to Frank Jones. There was also a rumor that Josiah Moore was having an affair with Frank Jones' daughter-in-law. So they were enemies, and the whole thing with the daughter-in-law, the affair with the daughter-in-law, was was found to be untrue or unfounded. But the townspeople still insisted that the Moores and the Joneses held a deep hatred for each other. It was believed by many, including a Detective Wilkerson of the Burns Detective Agency, that Jones didn't commit the murder, but he hired a man named William Mansfield to kill Josiah and his family. Which I think
sounds more likely.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
I think that seems awfully...
Random crimes don't happen like
No,
that.
I don't mean...
Then or now.
No, but wait, it does. Just wait. You'll be surprised at how much it happens. To me, it seems awfully violent to go after a competitor in farming equipment and murder his entire family. And not only murder it, but do it so violently and passionately. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't, that you shoot, you know what I mean? You shoot.
But that's loud and noisy, and you have to take the whole family out.
Clearly.
They had a lot of boys. They were competitors.
Okay, so maybe it was the son's thing. I don't know. The townspeople 100% insist that they hated each other. The third suspect is the one that I kind of felt was the most viable, just because he had all the different elements that would go into, as if I know anything, would go into someone who would do something like this. His name was Lynn George Jacqueline Kelly, but he went by Reverend George Kelly.
Reverend like a minister, Reverend?
Yeah. Yes. No, he was, I of course went on Ancestry like I always do. And he was, he's listed on all the census as a minister of the gospel and stuff. So that was his job, was as a reverend. He's a really creepy little man. I wanted to show you guys a picture of him, see what you guys think. And the picture will be on our website, but you guys tell me. It's a creepy little guy. He had a history of sexual deviancy.
He looks like a worm.
He does. He's really tiny, too. I guess he's really, really little.
Oh, he's got a weird shaped head. Well, big forehead.
He's just strange looking, right? Just
like that one's
creepy.
more clear.
Yeah.
He had a history of sexual deviancy and mental problems. He admitted to being in town the night of the murders and admitted that he had left early in the morning on the 10th. He was a reverend and a son of a minister who was born in England in 1878 and moved to the U.S. with his wife, Laura, in 1904. Was there a picture of him and his wife, Laura?
Yeah.
She's
tall.
Yeah, 3 feet taller than him.
Yeah, really tall.
3 feet taller than him?
I mean,
Are you exaggerating?
I'm exaggerating.
Oh, okay. I was like, really?
3 feet would have made her 8 foot 2. He was 5'2" and 119 pounds. She's at least 5'6", though, right?
Yeah, probably.
In that picture. Did you see it, Tress?
No, I didn't.
She's almost.
She's like 6 inches taller than him. And
There
she
was
looks like a man.
She does a little bit,
Oh my gosh.
but
They look related.
she stuck by him through
Those Iowans. Iowans. I can say that too because my family's from there.
She stuck by him through all this, but he had been accused of being a peeping Tom in town. He had asked girls, like he had ran an ad for a secretary, and one of them fled that went to work for him, fled the house where she was working, because he insisted that she be naked while she was typing. So he was a little jacked up. Yeah.
He didn't want her to steal any papers.
He was, yeah, to put it in her pocket. He was in town at the time of the murder, and then admitted that he left early on the morning of the 10th. He was considered confident and well-versed and articulate while on the pulpit, but off the pulpit, he had a nervous demeanor, shifty eyes, and often spoke so quickly that he would drool.
Whoa.
Right.
Like, that seems like...
That's so funny, the things that you react to.
Well, it's just weird.
Yeah. But, well, and I say drool, but with the way that it was written, they said that he would speak so fast that saliva would dribble down his chin.
Ew.
Right?
Yeah.
I just said drool. So he was often, again, accused of being He was often accused, again, of being a peeping Tom. He scared the one girl that ran, that he had asked to pose nude, to type nude. He also was known for asking women and girls to pose nude for him. His small stature and meek personality led many to doubt that he could physically commit the murders, but police believe that he actually did, and the reasons that they did was that he was left-handed, which the police had determined the murderer to be from the blood spatters. He also had a history with the Moore family. Oh, and I want to go back. This is really gross. The reason that they know, this is so gross, and apparently it's a common thing with axe murderers, is they hit their victims in the head with the flat side. You know how I said it was the flat side of the axe? Do you want to know why?
Because the axe would get stuck in their head.
You knew that. Why did you know that? How did you know that?
It's only common sense.
But I never thought of that, though.
And I watch The Walking Dead,
There you
and they
go.
get their axe stuck in their head a lot.
Yeah. So,
And it's always a problem.
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, now after I know, yeah, because, I mean, I've tried to chop wood before. I mean, not on a regular basis, but it does get stuck in the wood. So that's why they always hit it with the flat side. But going back to Reverend Kelly, the police believe that he had done it because A, he was left-handed, which they had determined the killer was left-handed, and a dry cleaner in a nearby town said that they had received bloody clothing from Kelly a few days after the murders, and this is the dumbest thing too, he showed up at the crime scene asking police for access, claiming to be from Scotland Yard, which is just ridiculous. And why would they be in Iowa? Also, an elderly couple that had met him on the train on the morning of the 10th said he had told them about the murder before it was even known to the police or the public. He also raised suspicion because of his fascination with the case. He wrote many letters to the police and investigators and the family of the deceased. Like, he wrote to the Stillingers and to Josiah's brother.
Guilty.
See, that's what I'm saying about him, is that he did a lot of things that fit in with someone who committed a crime, like going back to the scene of the crime to see it, being obsessed with the case, reading all the papers, writing letters, trying to talk to the family. That's sort of someone. And he was also known as a sexual deviant, which, because of the violence of the crime, I believe had, even if they didn't find any evidence of it, which I don't know how they could after they let 100 people walk through there, I believe that it was of sexual nature. There was definitely a passion behind it.
And I don't think you have to be a strong person to swing an axe around.
If you're wackadoo anyways. I mean,
Yeah,
he
like
got
he
some
could-
kind of weird strength from...
Yeah. Well,
And
even
he was attacking sleeping people.
Yeah, even at this, it's not like he was. Yeah, at the size that he was, there's no reason for him not to have been able to do it.
Right. And 6 of the victims were children.
Yeah, I don't.
And
think
he
that's-
killed the biggest person first.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why he killed the biggest person first, because that was the person that could fight back
Yeah.
against him. So I don't know why people dismiss him because of his size, but They took him seriously enough that they arrested him, obviously. At one point, a private investigator wrote back to one of the letters that he had mailed, asking for details that the minister might know about the murder. Kelly replied with great detail, claiming to have heard sounds and possibly have witnessed the murders. At one point, he signed a confession, but it was believed that he was coerced into giving that confession. And this is what they did to him. They brought him in to jail. They arrested him on suspicion of committing the murders. And they put him in a jail cell. And then for 24 hours, they would bring him out of the cell and then do bad cop, good cop with him, with up to 3 to 4 other cops interrogating him at the same time, and then put him back in his cell and then bring him back out for didn't let him sleep or eat for 24 hours. And then at one of the times that they put him back in his cell, and there were 2 other cellies in there, because I'm hip. Cellies? Yeah.
Roommates?
I'm hip. His
Cellmates?
2 cellmates were not really cellmates. One was a reporter from one of the newspapers, and one was an investigator from another police department in another town. And they convinced him to confess, saying that it would be easier on him if he did confess. He finally did. He believed them and finally confessed, and then immediately recanted. He didn't. He said he did it, and then he said he didn't do it. He was tried twice for the murders. The first time was a hung jury, and they tried him again, and that resulted in an acquittal. And a lot of people believe that Senator Jones, the one I spoke about earlier, that they say that he hired someone to kill them. They believe that Senator Jones had a big hand in
the trial.
Yeah, in Reverend Kelly getting coerced, that the police were being paid under the table to kind of just get him in jail and move on.
As in, he actually did it, but he wanted someone else to go down for it?
Yeah, that he
knew who did it.
No one's saying that he did it. No one's really saying that Senator Jones physically committed the crime. They're saying that he hired someone, that he probably hired someone to do it. And then that's the 4th suspect, technically, is the person that they think that Senator Jones hired was a man named William Mansfield, who ultimately began being referred to as Blackie Mansfield. The reporters named him Blackie Mansfield. He was believed to be a serial killer anyways, and he had murdered his wife, infant child, and parents-in-law with an axe within 4 months of I think it was within a few months of the Villisca crime. He also is believed to have committed axe murders in Kansas and Illinois, both times arriving and leaving by train. The murders were similar in that the murderer had used bed sheets to cover the windows, and the murders were committed in precisely the same manner. Several other murders have been tied to Mansfield by Detective James Wilkerson of the Burns Detective Agency. Another axe murder had occurred just 4 days before the Moores, killing 2 ladies, and I have their names. 2 women, Jenny Peterson and Jenny Miller, had been killed. Both
Where
of them
were they killed at?
In, I want to say Kansas. It wasn't in Iowa. In each of those murders, a burning lamp with the chimneys off and left, and a basin of water with dried blood was found. So the murders were similar in that they were committed with an axe, but there was also the water and the lamp thing. However, Mansfield, after being arrested, was able to provide an alibi with payroll records showing him in a different part of Illinois at the time of in Illinois at the time of the Villisca murders. However, a restaurant owner from Shenandoah, Iowa, identified Mansfield as a man he saw the morning of the murders boarding a train. If his testimony is true, it would disprove the original alibi, and Mansfield was arrested and brought to Montgomery County because of the alibi. But because of the alibi, he was released for lack of evidence. So he got let go. The only one. Then there was another suspect, Henry Lee Moore, was a suspected serial killer. Also, he's not related to the Moore family. He was convicted of a murder of his mother and grandmother several months after the murders in Villisca. His weapon of choice being an axe. Also, before and after the Villisca murders, similar axe murders were committed. All of the cases showing striking similarities, leading to strong suspicion that some or all of the crimes were committed by an axe-murdering serial killer. Henry Moore ended up serving 36 years of a life sentence and was paroled in 1949. He was never tried or convicted in any other murder. So, those were the suspects. I I go back and forth between it being a serial killer and it being Reverend Kelly.
I think it's Reverend Kelly.
Reverend Kelly was also, townspeople testified that he was seen watching the family from afar and that he had been arrested at one time for peeking in one of their windows.
One of the Moore's windows?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was him.
I feel like it's hard to believe that there were serial killers.
If you're going to say serial killers back then, why?
I don't know.
It would be easier to get...
That's when there were serial killers.
Yeah.
I guess, because they could get away with it for a lot longer back then. But, I don't know. I mean, again, serial killers usually commit the crimes of passion. Like, all that stuff was there. It just seems to me that this Reverend Kelly guy, he had all of it going for him. He was a sexual deviant. He had a history of mental problems. He was in town during the murders. He sent bloody clothes to the cleaners.
He was creepy.
He was left-handed. He was in trouble for peeping on the moor. To me...
His wife looked like a man.
His wife stuck by him. She died before him. She died in 1947. He died at the age of 80, which...
Are you about to do more math?
I'm going to do more math. He was born in 1878 plus 80. So what year did he die? Oh, he died in 1958. But his wife stuck with him all the way, till the time that she died, which was about 10 years before him. He ended up moving to New York and living out his life. I couldn't find any more police records on him. Not that I did not try. I did try because there's a whole bunch of George Kellys. I mean, he probably could have gone by any portion of his name. He had a big old long name.
Yeah.
But he was still listed in all the census as being part of the ministry. But out of all of them, I really feel like... he seemed the most viable out of all of them. And you guys agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think the guy after him, I don't remember what you said his name was.
Mansfield. Blackie Mansfield.
That killed his family with an axe, too?
Yeah.
He could have just been a copycat murderer. I mean, that happens all the time. But also, it was so long ago. I don't know why, but I feel like an axe would be a common. For some reason, it just seems like a common murder weapon.
A common weapon?
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
because everyone had one. You were still
had to have one. Yeah.
Wood burning stoves.
Yeah.
The
case eventually ran cold and the house was boarded up. The home, originally built in 1868 by George Loomis, was purchased by Josiah Moore in 1903. After the murders, the home remained in the estate until 1915, boarded up. Can you imagine living in the town? The murder house?
And seeing it all the
time.
time. Yeah.
And it was boarded up from 1912 until 1915. And then it was purchased by J.H. Giesman. And then over the years, the home had 7 additional owners, including the Villisca State Savings and Loan, who had the title from 63 to 71. In 1971, the house was titled to a Kendrick and Vance, who in some fashion remained on the title until 1994, when it was sold to Rick and Vicky Sprague in 1994. A few months later, a real estate agent approached Darwin Lim, a gentleman named Darwin Lim, in hopes of interesting him in the property, because at the time he and his wife had owned and operated the Olson Lim Museum, which was located in the town square of downtown Villisca. He ended up, it was an auction, and he lowballed the offer thinking he wouldn't get the house. Mm-hmm. And it was a ridiculous amount. He said he should never have gotten it, that someone else should have gotten the house. But he did. He won the bid. And originally he and his wife had planned to rent it out like the previous owners had after it had been boarded up. The owners, I don't know other than if any of the owners actually lived in the house. They had used it as a rental property, and people didn't stay very long. And so when he and his wife were discussing what to do with it, they had set it up to be rented out and then decided against it because they had been told that people lasted a couple months every time they moved in and then moved out. So it just seemed like more work to them. So what they did is they went into the house and they completely restored the home to its original condition at the time of the murders. And if you go to the Villisca Ax Murder House website, it'll explain in detail what they had to do to take it back to the original 1912, because they're doing this in 1994. And they removed electricity, they removed the plant, they did everything. They took the house completely back to 100 years ago. And they decided to, they added it in 1998. It was added to the National Register of Historic Places. And now it's, I guess it's a museum of sorts. They offer tours and the narrators discuss the murder and the suspects of the murder. But it's really funny reading an article. Mrs. Lim had done an article and they said that she thinks it's a shame that people are more interested in the house because of the macabre part of it, that there was a murder there, instead of the history of the architecture and the history of the house and how people lived back in 1912. She thinks it's a shame that people are more fascinated by the paranormal aspect of it, which, I'm sorry, Mrs. Lim, if you ever actually hear this website, this podcast, that a little hypocritical, because their website sells tours where you can go daylight tours, or you can, for just around $400, a group of 6.
428.
Was that 428? For around $400, a group of 6 can spend the night in the Villisca murder house. And come on, she doesn't have like outside 1912 Villisca home. She has a giant sign that says Villisca
Ax Murder
House.
Yeah,
So,
because that's what's going to make money.
yeah, but I mean, don't act like it's such a shame that people only come here for the yeah, come on, that's what you're selling.
Yeah.
So, and it was really funny too. I don't know why I added this to my notes. The website recommends a heavy coat to overnighters in the spring and fall, as the house has no electricity or heating, which I thought that was really interesting. And at this point, I mean, the case is unsolved. It's not going to be solved. I'm always so hopeful whenever I start reading these stories that, I mean, unfortunate. It sucks that the reason why is because ineptitude, you know, they just didn't handle the crime scene very well. They could have gotten fingerprints. They could have done, he touched everything in the house. Like, why weren't fingerprints the first thing that was done? Why wasn't the house locked down, like immediately?
It was a small town. They didn't know how to handle such a crime.
And these people died and they didn't have to die. And it's just really sucks. And I'm going to let Chess tell the paranormal. A lot of not every one of our stories has a paranormal angle. It's part of the reason why we didn't really address it in the whole Elizabeth Short Black Dahlia stories, because unless there's specific claims of paranormal activity, I'm not going to include it in the podcast, because I think that there's already so much, it's not negativity, what's the word?
Skepticism.
Yeah, there's so many skeptics when it comes to paranormal activity, and I feel like it already has such a bad rap sometimes, and I don't necessarily believe in every ghost story. I don't. People are always surprised to hear that I'm the biggest skeptic. And like we said before, Tressa and I both belong to a paranormal research team, and I do research. Tressa is more into doing the investigations with them. It always bores the crap out of me, but I believe that it's a possibility. I believe something in my own personal belief. It's something that I believe that a more scientific approach to ghost hunting and investigations and stuff like that. And so when we tell our stories, and I know that the podcast is called Haunting History, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have a haunting portion in every episode that we do, because unless it makes sense and it goes with the story, and I'm going back to Black Dahlia, why we didn't mention the Black Dahlia. The Black Dahlia, the stories about her haunting things is the Biltmore Hotel. And people say that they see her on the 11th floor and the 12th floor, and they see her in the lobby. I'm calling bullshit on that, because I don't believe that she would go hang out at the Biltmore Hotel. It just doesn't make sense to me. So that's why we don't really talk about it if it doesn't make sense with our story. With the Villisca Ax Murders, there has been some paranormal findings there. I don't know if they're true. I don't know if they're accurate, but I do know that there's a lot, and tons. If you Google it, you'll find a ton. But there is one paranormal story that I really want Tress to share with you.
So on November 7th, 14, Robert Larson, 37, a man from Wisconsin, was at the house. He stayed the night there. And I've read in 2 different things. At first, it was just him, his mom, and his father were with him. They were doing a paranormal. But another article says also his wife, his 12-year-old stepson, 9-year-old stepdaughter, and 3-year-old son were also staying at the house.
Yeah, I heard it was a group of them.
Yeah.
Intending to go ghost hunting.
Yes,
right?
They were a paranormal team, and they did that on occasion. So shortly after midnight, around the same time that the murder...
They had determined the murders had happened.
Happened. The police were called, and Robert was found. He had a stab wound to his chest, and he was in critical condition. He was flown to Creighton Hospital in Omaha, Nebraska. They determined that the stab wound was a self-inflicted stab wound. He doesn't know why he did it. I don't think there's any memory. He also hasn't done any interviews, so this is all coming from other people. But this article from RedOakExpress.com.
He claimed to be a ghost hunter, though. Not just, this wasn't like his first experience.
No.
He had done this in other places.
Yeah, he was. He was known by his friends and family as Buck. And he had suffered several mini strokes and had some brain damage as well prior to this happening.
But most people claim that it was paranormal, that he was taken over
by someone else before he went to this place?
No. When he stabbed himself.
Yes, so afterwards, it seems that he went from, a hardworking, contributing member to society to a man regulated to using a walker, sleeping in a bed with toddler guardrails, and requiring 5 or more. He had gone from a hardworking, contributing member of society to a man regulated to using a walker, sleeping in a bed with toddler guardrails, and requiring 5 hours of home health care per day. This was after the incident. And tests have revealed that he has frontal lobe damage and has had several mini strokes.
And that's all since the episode. He was completely fine when he went to the Villisca murder house, and then suddenly he was ill and couldn't do anything anymore. Like, he stabbed himself in the room, and he has everything I had read said that he has no memories of what happened, and he was in the room of the Stillingers he was found in the room of the Stillingers were stabbed. Were killed, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
See, this is what doesn't make sense to me.
But before they went there, his family was struggling financially. So I don't know.
He might have done it for a publicity.
Could have been. It says that he applied for disability, and that was denied at first.
That was after or before?
Oh, it's really hard to tell from this article. It was hard to. You just find little tidbits about this.
I know, isn't it weird? Because it was such a significant thing. And there was an article that was written that the wife, Mrs. Lim, was interviewed for. And she very tinily touched the tip of the iceberg. She said, yes, he stabbed himself in one of the rooms. He was attending a ghost hunt overnight at the house. And that it's never happened to anyone else. And they hope it never happens again. But the times that he stabbed himself coincided with the times that they believe that murders happen. So people have attached it to paranormal, but I don't think he's said enough to say whether it was or not, right?
No, I haven't found any interviews with him.
A lot of there's websites that claim that it's America's most haunted building. That and I'm really curious about it. Troy Taylor, who is one of my favorite podcasts, Haunted America. Troy Taylor I think he wrote a book. He wrote a book where he has the whole story of the Villisca Ax murder, including first-hand accounts of hauntings. So that's a book. I'll share that because I'm enamored with Troy Taylor and Cody Beck. So,
I'd be interested in going there.
Would you go there?
I would.
I imagine that, again, I'm going to sound like a total ghost hunter again. I imagine if it is haunted, that it's probably and I'm not going to sound now I'm not going to sound like a ghost hunter because residual, that it's a repeat, like it's repeating itself over and over again. But people claim that they hear children playing, children's laughter. In parts of the night they'll hear children's cries and screams, and they see a shadow of a man on the stairs and in the hallway upstairs. That's the claims that they have in the house. And I don't know. I don't know if it's residual or if their spirits are still there. It's hard to know. It was such a violent crime. I mean,
well, let's go. It's about 60 miles from my family's house.
So we can go visit and spend the night there. I love Iowa. I think Iowa's probably one. Thank you. Iowa is probably one of the most beautiful. Driving through Iowa, it looked like a picture postcard to me.
Really?
No, it's so pretty. It's like green grass and like just one house,
very green.
One house by itself with a cow, just one cow. Like I don't know what they're doing with one cow, but it's my husband and I both were completely enamored. Out of the places that they drove through, I think Iowa was probably our favorite. It looked like a calendar. Regardless of the findings of paranormal investigators to the Villisca murder house, the facts remain. For years, police and private detective agencies searched for the killer who acted in the dark of night in June of 1912. Was it a single attack, or was it a stop in a serial killer's spree? Was it a local townsperson or a traveling killer? Either way, it's not likely that the mystery will ever be solved. And I hope that any paranormal investigators who claim to find evidence of the Moors or the poor Stillinger girls work really hard to cross those spirits over so that they can finally rest in peace. Thank you for listening to this episode of Haunting History Podcast. We love hearing from you, so please be sure to like, follow, and comment on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Haunting History Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to all your favorites. Also, you can join our Patreon site for exclusive content, upcoming contests, and information only available to our Patreon members. Visit our website at hauntinghistorypodcast.com for more information on each episode and links to our Patreon page and all the social media platforms. Until next time, I'm Kat, and remember, the living are far scarier than any ghost.
When it comes to teaching kids and teens about money, practice makes perfect. That's where Greenlight comes in. With a debit card and money app of their own, kids learn to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest. Parents send instant money transfers, create custom chores, and automate allowance, while kids track their spending, set savings goals, and practice money skills they can use today and for life. Get 1 month free when you sign up at greenlight.com/podcast.